Field Marshal Jojo, you're our top man. Prepare to leave the house.
Today you boys will be involved in such activities as war games, ambush techniques, and blowing stuff up.
I don't think I can do this.
Was? Of course you can.
Aber dann kamst du.
When I was your age, I had an imaginary friend. Got me in so much trouble.
Kids, it's time to burn some books.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the LuckyDog Podcast. This is your host, Elias Roush. This podcast is sponsored by EliasRoushMedia.com. Photo, video, digital media production. EliasRoushMedia.com. Link in the description. Today we're discussing Jojo Rabbit, 2019, directed by Taika Waititi, written by Taika Waititi, and this is based off of the book Caging Skies by Christine Lewins. Jojo is a lonely German boy who is a Nazi who lives with his mother. This movie is about Jojo having an imaginary friend who happens to be Adolf Hitler. And so this movie is about confronting his blind nationalism to Germany and to the Nazi Party as World War II continues to go on, toward the latter half of it. This movie is an hour and 48 minutes, and it's a dramedy. It's a dramedy and a it's a dramedy is what I would call it, because it's very much you're going to be laughing your ass off in some scenes, and then on the opposite spectrum, I was straight up bawling my eyes out at some points. So there is tonal whiplash from this movie, not in a bad way though. And so one thing I have realized about tackling this kind of interesting topic that not many directors, writers, or anybody wants to touch at this point. Mostly because who wants to make a movie with a friendly, quote unquote, friendly Adolf Hitler? So yeah, many people don't want to tackle a friendly, almost goofy, Looney Tunes-ish take on Adolf Hitler. Now, we've seen goofy Hitlers before in cinema and in television. I know South Park has been all over interpretations of Hitler. But, I mean, satirical black comedy involving Hitler has been involved in media since as early as the 1950s. And, I mean, what was that, only like 10, 20 years later? I believe that was, let me see. Oh, sorry, that was broadcast in 1990, but it was in the style of 1950s British sitcom. But yeah, we've had Hitler portrayed in many different fashions. Pretty much every time that we have a Hitler character in a movie is to have him as the big bad, so that you have our protagonist to go up and confront something as evil as that. So when you are bringing someone of that stature who has something so heinous behind his name, and you're trying to bring levity to it, you got to walk a tightrope, is what I'd say, because you're not putting him in a Justice League movie or something like that. You're not putting him in a sitcom television show. You're putting him in a movie where he's quote unquote befriending a friend. He's befriending a kid, and he's influencing him. And we, as the viewer, are watching this movie from the eyes of a child. So the one thing about this movie that is just really jarring at first is this kind of Wes Anderson cinematography style meets a Holocaust film. And so if you've watched any Wes Anderson films, you're aware, he loves to do the pan left to right, tilts up and down, and he likes to always have that smooth slider impressions when he's behind the camera. It's not quite that to that degree, but I would say overall, a lot of people are going to say this is like the Moonrise Kingdom, which is the Wes Anderson film, meets a World War II fictional tale. So, yeah, it's an interesting take on this time and period. The thing about it is, the first hour of this movie is going to have it's going to have you laughing. It's going to have amazing actors in it. I think that I don't have a shortcoming in the bunch. Some people aren't going to enjoy the performances of some of the supporting cast, mostly because some of the supporting cast is just straight up goofy. And I personally did not have a problem with that. I do think that there's tonally, some of these characters feel like they're in from different movies. But yeah, so let me just describe some of these characters real quick. Roman Griffin Davis plays Jojo. First time actor on the big screen. He is phenomenal. I cannot wait to see this. I cannot wait to see him in additional movies. He's a fantastic young actor, and he holds this movie together. Scarlett Johansson, she plays the mother, Rosie. She is phenomenal. I've never seen Scarlett Johansson channel this kind of energy before. It's kind of this quippy quirkiness about her that really works. Taika Waititi plays Adolf, and he is a straight up Bugs Bunny cartoon caricature of Hitler. So when I was going into this, I was like, this sounds like, maybe not the best idea. How could you really portray a Hitler that is going to work on screen? And this is about as good as you could do it for me personally, because he is such a ridiculous character. I kept thinking he was like a Looney Tunes character. He's straight up Bugs Bunny. But yeah, he's turned up to 11. And he has some great lines. Sam Rockwell as Captain Kenzendorf, who's one of the Nazis. He's excellent as always, basically playing that same kind of hard-ass, man, how did I end up in this situation kind of guy. Kind of regretful, but also he's normally playing a shitty guy, but he normally has some sort of redeeming arc at the end, and he's kind of in that same realm. And his two companions are Rebel Wilson from Pitch Perfect as Fraulein Rom, and Alfie Allen as Finkel, who is basically next to no lines. Rebel Wilson, she was kind of a problem for some of the bigger critics that didn't want this movie to be too goofy and lighthearted, but I really felt like we needed these lines from Rebel Wilson, and we needed these lines from all these other great actors to deliver some of the comedy that was written for him from Taika Waititi. I think that because of the tone of the movie, we needed to have some sort of lightheartedness to it, and they really brought it for me. And they came at points within the story that made sense for me personally. It didn't throw me out of the movie. Now, I don't know if that's going to agree with everyone. I see that on Rotten Tomatoes, this is 77, and on IMDb, it's about a 7.5 or something like that. I'll tell you right now, I gave this a 9 out of 10. I was lying on the bed, laughing my ass off at one point, and then, I don't know, less than 40 minutes later, I'm bawling my eyes out. So this movie definitely made me feel something, and I'm curious to see if this is the effect for everyone else. I understand the comedic portrayal of Nazis is kind of frowned upon, but I mean, it's so ridiculous, you can't take it seriously. Let's see. Most of the, let me see. There was one more actor I wanted to cover. It's one of his friends. Archie Yates as Yorkie. Yorkie is basically Jojo's best friend within the movie. And they're both just playing these little Aryan Nazis, how cute. First of all, it felt like it was a mirror to society to see all these kids in these quote unquote war scenarios that they're, just training them to kill. That was, kind of, it's like, whoa, this is intense. The thing about the two actors, they play off together extremely well. I could watch a movie with just them alone. They were hilarious. The thing is, the messaging behind the movie when it comes to the Nazism, the fascists, the whole atmosphere that this movie is taking place in is kind of softballed in a way. In a sense, like, I don't need the movie to say, hey, it's bad to be a Nazi, and I don't need to be beat over the head with the message or anything like that. And ultimately, that's, given where, most society is, I guess that's kind of what you would agree with. I'm not going to say what this movie ends with, but I will say that the movie's message becomes a little bit muddled toward the last 15 to 20, maybe even 30, mostly because there's a tonal shift in the middle. I still think it works, even with the tonal shift, even with the amount of, what's it called, the comedy versus the drama. I think it still works, even though the messaging's a little muddled, still works. Like I said, 9 out of 10. I gotta hop into the spoiler section to talk about this in any more detail. But let's hop into the Jojo Rabbit spoiler section in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we are in the spoiler section for Jojo Rabbit, and I just want to talk about this real quick. There's not tons to talk about, I will say, except for the fact that, oh my gosh, yeah, freaking Joe and his freaking house. Oh my. Yeah. Okay, so I forgot that I was actually keeping one of the main plot points until the spoiler section, and I almost completely forgot Mrs. Thompson McKenzie as Elsa, who basically plays, I want to say, is somewhat like an Anne Frank stand-in. She is a young Jewish girl who is living in Jojo's attic under and his mother knows about it. And so his mother and Jojo both know about Elsa living in the house, but they don't ever talk about it to each other. So there are tons of scenes that are just dripping with sweet, heart-filled moments between these two. I genuinely felt like these were they were a real family, mother and son, and I felt like I could really relate in that sense. I know not everybody can, but I really enjoyed the scenes of them together. They worked together as, a family very well. I wish I would have had maybe a little bit more of the three of them together. I do think Jojo has amazing comedic timing when it comes to the questioning of Elsa and Elsa herself. Thompson McKenzie, don't sleep on her. She's phenomenal. She's just as good as Jojo. Their dynamic together is amazing, and the way that this movie ends with the unfortunate death of his mother, and then him coming across her shoes and giving her a hug. Oh my God! It literally just ripped my heart out. I was a big bucket of tears by that point. I was like, this sucks. And I don't know why I could relate to this a lot more than the majority of it. I guess because it takes such a lighthearted tone, the majority of the movie, that it's just kind of whiplash when you actually see the realizations of what these people are standing for. Because for the majority of the movie, we are not in the guise or in the quote-unquote shoes of Elsa or any Jewish family. We are in the shoes and in the perspective of this young Aryan Nazi boy, but really he's not a Nazi. He doesn't want to be. He doesn't want to kill. He's just surrounded by a bunch of assholes who are telling him to do shit, and he doesn't believe it. And so Elsa is the one to say something to him about it and bring it to realization. And so I felt like that is the biggest line within the movie. You're not a Nazi. You're just a boy trying to join a stupid club. And that definitely summarizes, I guess, what they want to say is the Nazi Party and ideals of it. The thing is, there is so much more to the Nazi Party than just hating Jews and Heil Hitler and all the place than what they showed in this movie. I felt like we've got characterization or a limited scope of what exactly the Nazi Party was doing. Like, to say this movie is even about Nazis is so vague. It's just about it's basically about Nazis, and it's basically about Germany. But I feel like from a historical standpoint, we got such little about what they did. It's it definitely would have been much darker of a movie the more that you lean into it. But still, I felt like there was kind of this like I said, that softballed message of fascism and being a Nazi. I just thought that Jojo really needs to have a good talk with. Well, I wanted him to have a talk with the Adolf Hitler character, and maybe he figures out that he doesn't want to be a Nazi in that way, and he sort of does at the end. But he literally just punts his imaginary Hitler out the window, and then he just flies out Looney Tunes style. I was calling him a Looney Tunes character before he flew out the window. When he did that shit, I was like, all right, that's it. He's fucking Bugs Bunny in my book. But yeah, I think I wanted one scene of Jojo kind of really gearing in to Adolf Hitler and saying, fuck you, fuck your values, and fuck your group and everything it stands for. I really wanted, or maybe not even to that extent. It doesn't have to be that crude, but I wanted him to articulate a little bit more about him not wanting to be a Nazi a little bit more. And so that's why I think the movie flops a little bit. It's mostly all behind the scenes. It's mostly all Jojo having internal struggles, and you realizing it on his face, and you seeing what happens to him because of that. I do feel like it stumbles at that point. It's around the point where he loses his mother. It's and then he goes back to Elsa, and he's upset at her, and he thinks that it's kind of her fault. So he takes the knife and stabs. He's going up to her and stabs Elsa in the shoulder, and she just kind of stands there and removes the knife, and it's kind of inconsequential, but you understand that he's towards Elsa, but it's also he feels horrible, like he just lost his mother and he wants someone to blame. And so it's completely natural to understand where that would come from. I just feel like I think I wanted a little bit more, less focused on his personal struggle and more focused on the overall ideals that he was standing for at the beginning of the movie. But other than that, I really love this movie. It's the type of movie I want to show other people to see what their reactions are. I couldn't recommend it more, mostly because it's a coming-of-age story that just happens to be wrapped around the Holocaust and have tones and ideals that have to pertain to today. And so, yeah, thank you for listening to the LuckyDog Podcast. If you like this podcast, check out more LuckyDog Podcasts, SoundCloud, Twitter, Facebook, Twitch, Instagram. All the links are below. Comments, questions, concerns, the LuckyDogPodcast@gmail.com. PayPal.me/LuckyDogPodcast to support the podcast. Thank you for listening to the Jojo Rabbit podcast. We could not do this without you. Internationally, in the world, in the States, no matter where you are. Thank you for listening, and Diggity.
He likes dressing up in a funny uniform and wants to be part of a club.
Yogi?
Oh, God. Nothing makes sense anymore.
Yeah, I know. It's definitely not a good time to be a Nazi.
Dancing behavior.